All right, let's get right into it. When we talk about Jerry Springer, we're not just talking about a TV host. We're talking about a cultural earthquake. This guy fundamentally rewired what we expect from our screens, and maybe even from each other.
Oh, for sure. And from ourselves, right? This isn't just a biography. This is more like an autopsy of a feeling, a whole phenomenon.
I mean, just listen to this quote from the man himself. I've become an adjective. Think about that. The sheer branding power. Your name becomes a shorthand for a very specific, very potent kind of chaos.
He's not wrong at all. You say, it was a total Jerry Springer moment, and boom, the entire picture just floods your brain. But it's more than a brand, isn't it? It feels, I don't know, it feels more like a scar.
Okay, so to really get how we ended up here, we've broken this whole thing down into 5 parts. First, we're going to look at the bizarre political career that kicked this all off. Then, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the show itself, what we're calling the architecture of spectacle.
And from there, we have to talk about the very real human cost. Then, believe it or not, its transformation into high art. And finally, we'll try to make sense of his incredibly complicated legacy.
Right, because you have to remember, before all the chair throwing and the paternity tests, there was Councilman Springer. And this is honestly where the story gets really, really weird.
It's so wild. He starts out as this young, idealistic, anti-war politician in Cincinnati, like a total hippie-hearted guy, which is just, it's so hard to square with the man he became.
Okay, just look at this timeline. It's bananas. In 1974, he pays a prostitute with a personal check. I mean, who does that? He has to resign in disgrace. For most people, that's career over, done. But a year later, he runs this ad where he just owns it and he wins. It's like this masterclass in weaponizing your own scandal to build a brand as the only honest guy in the room.
But see, I don't think it's just branding. This is a guy who was literally born in a London tube station during a Nazi bombing raid. Maybe he just thrives in public chaos because on some level, it's the only stability he's ever known. You know, I've had my own public flameouts, and honestly, sometimes just telling the brutal, ugly truth feels way safer than trying to keep up a lie.
So that instinct, that impulse to run toward the chaos instead of away from it, that becomes the literal blueprint for his show. So let's get into the architecture of how that circus was actually built.
It's almost impossible to picture now, but this is how it all started. A completely conventional, politically focused talk show. He had guys like Oliver North on. He was trying so hard to be the next Phil Donahue, talking about serious issues like homelessness and gun control. It was respectable. And it was totally failing.
So this new producer, Richard Dominic, comes in, and everything changes. And the numbers, I mean, they just speak for themselves. In May of '98, he's not just doing well, he is beating Oprah. Beating Oprah. Nobody had done that in over a decade. And look at that 70% year-over-year growth. That's not just a hit show. That is the birth of the attention economy. He figured out what we are all secretly hungry for, and he just served it up raw.
And this really is the heart of the whole debate, right? The critics called it human bear baiting. They said it was basically WWE for real life, and that it taught us all to just scream at each other for entertainment. You can draw a straight line from this show to the way our political discourse works today.
See, I completely disagree with that. Was it exploitative? 100%. But you can't just write it off as fake. This was the first time that poor, marginalized people nobody else would ever put on television, were actually seen and heard. It was an emotional public sphere. It was messy, it was ugly, but it was theirs. For better or worse, it was the only place they had a voice at all.
But here's the thing, having a voice and being exploited are not mutually exclusive. Not at all. And when you start to look behind the curtain, you see that the voice they were given came at an incredibly high price. So let's talk about the human cost.
They even had a name for where they found their guests, the Springer Triangle. They weren't just booking people. They were actively targeting a specific geography of poverty and desperation. They were looking for people who were vulnerable enough to say yes.
And once they got him to the studio, the manipulation was just relentless. Producers admitted to goading guests backstage to make sure they were amped up and angry. There were even these horrible allegations that they'd threatened to withhold plane tickets home if guests got cold feet. The goal was never to help anyone. The executive producer even said it himself, "We weren't problem solvers. It was a production line for conflict. It's just preying on people."
And then, well, the inevitable happened. The on-screen performance spilled over into reality in the most horrific way you can imagine. On the very same day their episode aired, a guest named Ralph Panitz murdered his ex-wife, Nancy, who he'd just been on the show with. And that's the question, isn't it? The judge in the murder trial asked it directly. Are ratings more important than the dignity of human life?
Well, the cynical take is that the producers were just supplying a demand. We were the ones watching. We were the ones who made it a smash hit.
And that's what's so gross, because I have to admit, I was hooked on that story when it happened. I consumed every single detail, and I feel disgusting about it now. We all kind of have a little bit of blame to carry on that one.
So, just to recap, you have a show that's being implicated in a murder trial. It's being called the worst show in television history, and it's basically the symbol of total cultural decay. So, logically, what happens next? It becomes an award-winning opera. It makes absolutely no sense. No, seriously, how does this actually happen? How do you get from people throwing chairs on a soundstage to the National Theatre in London?
Well, it definitely wasn't without a fight. When the BBC announced they were going to broadcast Jerry Springer the Opera, they got 55,000 complaints, a record. It was this huge, orchestrated campaign from religious groups who were furious about the content, which, to be fair, had Jesus and Satan as guests on the show.
But while you had protesters picketing the theaters, the critics were giving it a clean sweep. It won every single major Best Musical award in the UK. The establishment, the world of so-called high art, absolutely loved it.
Right, because the artists saw what was hiding there in plain sight. Underneath all that chaos, they found this profoundly universal theme. They called it the Jerry Springer moment. That deep, desperate human need to be seen. To have your story, no matter how messy or how painful, be the most important thing in the entire world, even if it's just for a few minutes. So, where does all this leave us? You have a political flameout who becomes the undisputed king of trash TV.
Who then becomes the subject of high opera. What is the final takeaway here?
For me, I think the answer is pretty simple. He never really left the circus. He just changed the suit. I mean, his final show, Judge Jerry, was the exact same spectacle, just with a gavel instead of his bodyguard, Steve.
I don't know. I keep coming back to that sign-off he used at the end of every single chaotic show. Take care of yourselves and each other. In this world he helped create, a world that seemed to have no guardrails at all, was that his one genuine attempt to install one?
Which really leaves us with the final question. It's easy to blame him, and maybe we should. But did Jerry Springer actually ruin the culture? Or was he just the first person who was brutally honest enough to turn on the cameras and hold up a mirror to what was already there all along?
He showed us a part of ourselves we really didn't want to see, and we made him a massive star for it. What that says about him is complicated, but what it says about us? Well, that's maybe even more complicated.